So here we are, we're here for a public meeting for the Eureka Slough Bridges replacement project as part of the project's draft environmental document and circulation period, which is currently in process, as well as our draft section for evaluation. A few housekeeping items before we get on with our meeting. All attendees are in listen-only mode during the video portion of this presentation. Everyone is encouraged and feel free to ask any informal questions and provide those informal comments in the chat section of the WebEx meeting platform. If you have a question or comment that you'd like to make verbally, I ask that everyone that'd like to do that, please hold your questions or comments till the end of the meeting. We will have time to, we'll have that opportunity at the end. We will first go through questions that are entered into the chat function in WebEx, and then we'll open it up for verbal questions and comments. Comments can be submitted to a dedicated email address for the project, Eureka Slough Bridges @dot.ca.gov, or they can also be submitted via mail to the California Department of Transportation, North Region Environmental E5 branch, attention Steve Croteau, and the address is 1656 Union Street, Eureka, California 95501. This presentation will be shared on the project webpage, and I expect within some point this week, it should be uploaded to the website. I encourage you, if you'd like to go back and review it, or if any of your community members or colleagues weren't able to attend tonight, please encourage them to watch the recording. And then if you are participating in this virtual meeting, both in video, as well as making any comments, either verbally or in the chat feature, please be advised it is being recorded, so your participation will be made public via the website. The project webpage, much easier URL to remember than our common Caltrans web addresses. So you can go to tinyurl.com/Eureka Slough, and you'll find all the information that we'll cover this evening, as well as links to the environmental document and other project documents can be found at the webpage. Moving on, our non-discrimination policy statement. Caltrans ensures that no person in the state of California is excluded from participation in, denied the benefits of, or otherwise subjected to discrimination in Caltrans programs, policies, procedures, activities, and services on the grounds of race, color, national origin, sex, age, or disability. For information or guidance on how to file a complaint or obtain more information regarding Title VI, please contact the Title VI branch manager at 916-324-8379, or you can visit the following webpage, dot.ca.gov/programs/civil-rights/Roman numeral 6. Our agenda for this evening will cover these items. We'll first go through some project background. We'll hit purpose and need of the project, as well as project scope. We will present the alternatives being considered for the project, talk about the right-of-way components or elements of the project, as well as environmental subject matter of the project. We'll review some the cost and schedule of the alternatives, and then we'll also let everyone know how to engage and leave a comment during this public comment period as part of the draft environmental document. Okay, project location. So as most of you are probably aware, but we'll cover it anyway, we are discussing the Eureka Slough Bridges. They are two independent structures. The Caltrans bridge numbers are 04-0022L and then 04-0022R, and that just signifies the left bridge and the right bridge. We're in Humboldt County on Route 101, and the post-mile limits of the project are 79.5 to 80.2. Little project background for everyone here. The southbound Eureka Slough Bridge was formerly programmed and identified as a seismic retrofit project. And shortly thereafter, it was identified that the northbound structure was also in need of a seismic retrofit. Prior to that, though, a value analysis had been performed looking at what is the best alternative to move forward with, considering the needs of the structures as well as the long-term lifespan of these structures, considering they are essentially at their expected lifespan. The results of that value analysis recommended replacement of both structures for multiple reasons. Some of the more significant reasons were to minimize our environmental impacts. Our studies showed that by doing a seismic retrofit in the immediate future was only going to allow us to remain with these structures for a short amount of time until we'd have to come back in and replace the structures, and having significant environmental impacts in both of those instances. In addition to that, the cost to do two of those projects independently, a seismic retrofit followed by replacing the structures shortly thereafter, was going to be significantly more costly than a single project, as well as impacts the traveling public, being that this is not a small project and is going to take multiple seasons of construction to complete. So in 2023, the project was officially rescoped and reprogrammed as a new project to replace both structures. And that's what we have here today in terms of our discussion, our draft project report, and our draft environmental document. Now we'll cover the project purpose and need. Every project within the department has a very specific purpose and need. The purpose and need is essentially the sideboards that dictate the improvements and work that will be performed for the project in terms of the project scope. The purpose of this project is to improve the function and geometrics of the northbound and southbound Eureka Slough Bridges, to ensure uninterrupted traffic movement in the event of a collision or emergency incident, seismic event, or any other catastrophic event, and provide improved access for pedestrians and cyclists across the bridges. The project need is to address structural and geometric deficiencies in the northbound and southbound structures. The southbound structure has seismic deficiencies, is fracture critical, and has a non-standard profile, which contributes to a collision rate at the bridge departure that is double the statewide average when compared to similar facilities. The northbound structure has seismic deficiencies with non-standard bridge rails and built on raised concrete curbs within the shoulders. Both structures are approaching their design life and have narrow shoulders that impede multimodal transportation. Now to go through some of the existing conditions for both the northbound and southbound structure. So when looking at the northbound structure, they're pictured to the right of this slide. It is essentially a precast voided slab on driven piled extensions. That is the type of structure that we're looking out there at today. There exists two 12-foot travel lanes, a 1.5-foot outside shoulder, and a 2-foot inside shoulder. And then when looking at the southbound structure is composed of a steel pony truss, as well as concrete T-girders on driven timber piles. We also have two 12-foot travel lanes, a 6-foot outside shoulder, and a 1.5-foot inside shoulder. In terms of the project scope, we propose to replace both the northbound and southbound structures. They're approximately 900 feet in length. The proposal with both project alternatives would be to replace them as independent structures. The structure type would be a precast wide flange I-girder on driven piles. We would have two 12-foot travel lanes in each direction or on each structure. Each structure would also have 10-foot outside shoulders and a 5-foot inside shoulder. And each structure would also have a 12-foot separated pedestrian and bike path. And there would be connections to the Bay Trail as well as the waterfront trail. Now to present the alternatives being considered for the project. We have two alternatives labeled alternative 2A and 2B. Here you see a typical section of each. Essentially, the roadway cross-section, the lane widths, and the features that will be provided to both motorized and non-motorized users are essentially the same. It's just the structure location differs between alternative 2A and 2B. With alternative 2A, which you can see at the top of this typical section sheet, those two structures are northbound and southbound are being replaced on virtually the same alignment that the existing structures are on today. With alternative 2B, and actually let me step back a moment. With alternative 2A, that does require the use of a temporary detour bridge in order to facilitate replacing them on their existing alignments. We then looked at alternative 2B, which was an alternative to avoid the need of a temporary detour bridge. But in order to do that, the southbound bridge required a slight realignment from its existing location. You'll see there in the typical section, we have a width or a distance of 63 feet between the inside edges of each structure. That represents the distance between the widest point or furthest point between the two structures. And we will look at a layout so you can see how the alignment would look in a realigned fashion. So this is alternative 2A in a layout view. This is the alternative that replaces both structures on their existing alignments. You'll notice, as I mentioned, the blue bike paths are connections to Bay Trail, to Jacobs Avenue, as well as to the waterfront trail on each quadrant of the structure. And with alternative 2B, you'll notice the southbound structure has a slight realignment from its existing location in order to not need a temporary detour structure. I will also go through a construction staging scenario sequence right after this, and you'll be able to see how the temporary bridge will fit into the alternative 2A, and how the construction sequence will also look for alternative 2B. And it will also show you the various temporary work trestles that we'll be utilizing to facilitate construction of these bridges. Again, with alternative 2B, you see in each quadrant of the structure, we have connections to the Bay Trail and Jacobs Avenue, as well as to the Eureka waterfront trail. So now I'll present the construction staging scenarios for each alternative. In terms of traffic control, prior to getting into the step-by-steps, we do plan to maintain 2 lanes of travel in each direction during the day. But at night, we are planning to have limited single-lane closures to facilitate the construction. We also plan to have limited full closures of the highway at night for traffic switches, and we do expect those to be limited. And we are not expecting access impacts to adjacent parcel businesses or residences as part of the construction. Now, construction staging for alternative 2A. So in stage 1, we would construct a west temporary trestle. A temporary trestle is essentially a work surface to perform the construction activities from, where all the equipment would be staged, and we facilitate construction from that platform. In stage 2, we would then construct a temporary southbound bridge, shown there in green. In stage 3, we would switch the existing southbound traffic to the temporary detour bridge in light green, and we would then demolish the existing southbound bridge and construct a new southbound bridge, there shown in the dark green. In stage 4, we would shift existing northbound traffic to the new southbound bridge constructed in stage 3, shown there in red. And now at this point, we would have southbound traffic traveling on the green line. We'd have northbound traffic traveling along the red line. In stage 5, we would then construct an east temporary trestle. And in stage 6, we would construct a new northbound bridge there in the dark green. All the while, existing or southbound traffic on the light green, northbound traffic still remains on the red alignment. And then finally in stage 7, we would shift with both the southbound and northbound structures having been replaced. We would then shift the northbound and southbound traffic to their appropriate bridges in both the southbound and northbound directions. Now with alternative 2B again is the realignment of the southbound structure in order to not need a temporary detour bridge. With this alternative in stage 1, we would construct a west temporary trestle there shown in purple. In stage 2, we would construct the new southbound bridge in light green, as well as the southbound lanes off the bridge on both ends. They're shown in the darker bright green color. And then in stage 3, we would switch southbound traffic to the new southbound bridge previously constructed, and we would switch northbound traffic to the existing southbound bridge, very similar to what we did in alternative 2A. So in this condition, you'd have southbound traffic on the green and northbound traffic on the red alignment. And then along with that, in stage 3, we would construct an east temporary trestle to facilitate construction of the northbound bridge. So in stage 4, we would demolish the existing northbound bridge and construct a new northbound bridge. They're shown in an ivory white color. And then in stage 5, we would switch northbound traffic to the new northbound bridge. And then our final stage, stage 6, we would go and demolish and remove the existing southbound bridge that would remain between the two structures. Now on to right-of-way and utilities. The project is expecting to need temporary construction easements, but we are not expecting to impact business access or operations as part of the temporary construction easements we'll need. And with permanent right-of-way acquisition also expected to be required. And again, we are not expecting permanent right-of-way acquisition to impact business access or operations. We will have some utilities in conflict with the project. Those include electric, phone, internet, sewer, and water. And now on to environmental topics related to the project. The level environmental document for this project is an environmental impact report under the California Environmental Quality Act, CEQA, an environmental assessment under the National Environmental Policy Act, NEPA. The draft environmental document public circulation began on June 25th of this year, just last month. And now on to impacts and mitigation subject matter for the project. Everything with regards to impacts and mitigation occurs with a very specific hierarchy. As a priority, we always try to avoid impacts as much as we can. Where we cannot avoid impacts, we employ minimization measures to minimize those impacts. But often with projects of this magnitude, while we try to avoid impacts and we minimize those impacts, we still do have the resulting impacts as part of the project. And so with that, we expect to have impacts to estuary and marsh, wetlands and waters, as well as fish species. And we expect those impacts to have to be both temporary as well as have some permanent impacts. We also expect to have both on and off-site mitigation and preservation as part of our plan to mitigate the impacts created. And mitigation ratios are expected to range from 1:1 to 4:1. A lot of that will all come from our coordination with permitting agencies, which will be occurring as we move forward and continue with project development. Here's a summary table that highlights the differences in impacts between both alternatives, 2A and 2B. You'll see there in the left column, and I won't go through and read all of this. This will be available as a recording for anyone that would like to reference this. All this information can also be found in the environmental document. But as I mentioned, resources such as estuary and marsh, tidal and marine waters, freshwater wetlands, and so on and so forth. All those impacts are listed there, comparing both alternatives. as well as still observed soil area, new impervious surface area, impacts and implications to the Humboldt Bay National Wildlife Refuge as part of our Section 4F, as well as the differences in aesthetics between the two. And we talk about aesthetics, really we're talking about the alignment versus existing versus a realignment. In terms of aesthetics of the structure and what the structure will look like, we have not gotten to that point within project development, but we do realize that is likely going to be an important subject matter for the community. Moving on, in terms of capital costs between the two alternatives, and when I say capital cost, that is the cost to construct the project, acquire right-of-way, perform mitigation. These costs that you see before you do not include the cost to develop the project in terms of the effort, staff time, resources to go into developing an environmental document, performing a design, none of that. So this is simply to construct and acquire the right of way, perform mitigation. So for alternative 2A, the construction capital cost is $371 million, and the right of way capital is approximately $11 million. The estimated cost for alternative 2B for construction capital is $335 million, and right-of-way capital at $10 million. Now, as the project continues to develop and we have more knowns and less assumptions, and as we refine our design, we do expect these numbers to refine to a degree. But based on the information we have today, this is our best estimate. In terms of schedule, our draft environmental document was completed and began circulation, public circulation, just last month, June of 2025. Our target to reach project approval and a completed environmental document, which part of that we would also have a selected preferred alternative. Our target is July of 2026. Our permitting phase would span from July of 2026 to March of 2028. We are then targeting to have our final design complete in July of 2028 and begin construction in the spring of 2029. And we are estimating construction to be approximately 5 years. As I mentioned before, the DED public comment period began on June 25th, 2025. That comment period does run through August 9th of 2025. We do welcome your comments. You can submit your comments via mail to the address listed there, California Department of Transportation, North Region Environmental, E5 Branch, attention Steve Courteau, 1656 Union Street, Eureka, California, 95501. You can also submit your comments via email to the dedicated project email, which is Eureka Slough Bridges at dot.ca.gov. And again, all the materials that you would need to review for any comments you want to make, including the 4F evaluation, the draft environmental document, draft project report, that can all be found at the project website, which is tinyurl.com/Eureka Slough.